Dad rented half a shop in downtown Dar. He called the new venture Camera Pigs. Dar in the 1960s was an ideal place for an ambitious young freelance. Things were on the move. The winds of change were blowing out the old and sweeping in the new. There were new faces to photograph and a hungry market. Jomo Kenyatta had come to power in Kenya. Milton Obote in Uganda, and in Tanganyika, soon to be Tanzania, Julius Nyerere was head of state. There were also rich pickings to be had on the spice island of Zanzibar, a mere 10-minute air hop off the coast of Tanganyika. Unfortunately for the world's press, whenever anything newsworthy happened in Zanzibar, the authorities had a nasty habit of closing down its airport. But there was one way to get across: by dhow. So when Dad was tipped off that he ought to get across in a hurry, he knew just what to do. As a local lad, he knew that the nearest point to Zanzibar was the old slaving port of Bagamoyo. Off he went and haggled for a dhow and someone to lift him on it. Dad made it in time. It was a smart career move. Dhow travel, however slow, was better and more profitable than sitting in a departure lounge looking at grounded airplanes. The dhow carrying Dad would have slipped in unnoticed amongst the fishing boats that tie up by the fish dock. Carrying a stills camera and a borrowed cine camera, Dad went quietly about his work. It was risky. People were jumpy. No one was quite sure who was friend and who was foe. 40 years on, these are the images that Dad sent back. The story was sensational. A semi-literate Ugandan opportunist, self-styled Field Marshal Johnny Okello, had seized power with a 600-strong peasant army. In a week of bloodletting, 13,000 were murdered, their bodies dumped in the sea. Thousands were herded behind barbed wire or spirited away behind the grim walls of Kilimamigugu prison. For 4 days, Dad's work was headline news. He got his pictures out the same way as he got in, by dhow. Meanwhile, white families took the hint. They abandoned their enviable lifestyle in a hurry, but at least they left with their lives. Dad recorded the exodus. The first out was 61 Americans, 12 British and 5 West Germans on the American destroyer USS Manly. Then the British ship HMS Owen rescued another 150 British citizens who were taken to safety on the mainland. Okello's reign of terror ended when the island's first president, Sheikh Karume, came to power. With Karume in control, things became even more dangerous. As the winds of change swept through Africa, Dad paid many visits here to Zanzibar. Between 1963 and 1966, he came at least 8 times. but the visit that was to make his name came in November 1965. Acting on a hunch, Dad turned off the main road and began taking photographs. They showed a military training camp with Russian and East German advisors, proof indeed that the Cold War had come to the Spice Island. Dad was working for a news agency called Viz News. Subscribers were offered all material shot by Viz News cameramen. Attached to the film was a camera sheet stating the cameraman's name. Dad thought he had got away with a sensational scoop in Zanzibar. How wrong he was. That footage went all around the world. When it got to the Soviet Union, the KGB picked up his name off the camera sheets. They informed their counterparts here. He was a marked man. The next time he came to Zanzibar, they picked him up at the airport and threw him into the notorious Kilimamigugu prison. He had just turned 23. For 28 days, he was beaten senseless, tortured, and interrogated. He said he only cried 3 times in his life. This was the first. The island's Attorney General during the Karume years of repression was Wolfango Dorado. Dorado trained and qualified in the London Inns of Court. He welcomes me to his living room. Mr. Dorado, 40 years ago, my dad was thrown into prison in Zanzibar. What do you remember of that time?
I remember very sadly because everyone liked him. He used to move about quietly, not disturbing anyone, and go about his work. And then suddenly this comes out, and it was a shock to most of us who knew him.
You were Attorney General at that time. Did you have anything to do with it?
No. Remember, they always blame the Attorney General. The Attorney General is there. But he doesn't, most of the time, doesn't take part in these atrocities. And I did not. My work was to lower the temperature and stop these atrocities. He wouldn't allow that. So I was impotent. Attorney General was there, but the figurehead. But of course I was very upset when I heard that he was detained.
And there was nothing you could do in position as Attorney General?
Couldn't. If I went up to Karume, he'd just give me one slap. So, stand aside. We couldn't interfere.
Why was he released?
International outcry coupled with Nyerere's warning to Karume.
President Nyerere then deported my father from Tanzania. Was that part of the deal?
That would be part of the deal, yes.
It's not a deal that you would have brokered in any way?
No way.
No.
He's got the right to be here, he's had the visa and all that sort of thing, and then they ill-treat him, which is very bad. Very, very, very bad.
After 28 of the worst days of his life in Kilimamigugu jail, not knowing if he would live or die, Dad was finally released. He had lost 28 pounds, but he had gained a reputation.
That's where Mo made a name. And where other guys had been operating, but they didn't have the guts to get to Zanzibar. Mo was the one who did it. And from that time onwards, there was no looking back. He just went up, 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 up and up.